Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. I appreciate you watching. Give me just a second here. For some reason, it's displaying the wrong window. No big deal. Let's swap up that display capture window really quickly, and we can get back to it. Not sure why it switched on me like that. There we go. That's better. Good afternoon, everybody. We're entering into our last regular content module, which is on GUIs. So we're going to start talking about GUIs today. We'll start talking about GUIs today. We'll finish talking about GUIs the following week, and then the remainder of the weeks are just time for you to work on your final project. So we are, on the downhill for CSC 151 this spring. And I do like to handle the GUI module just a little bit different from the rest of the modules, right? In general, when I talk about the modules that I'm working on, I like to talk about them with context surrounding the material. And it's good to be able to do something like that, but in this particular instance, right, there's just way too much context out there to be discussed. So I mostly just write code for what I do for these lessons. So we're going to be making a program with a GUI now. So previously, up until this point, we've been working, and everything that we've been doing, that's been happening in the console, right? But the vast majority of software that we interact with is not console-based software. It's GUI-based software. And when we say GUI-based, GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to take our program and move it from something that would be GUI-based, that would be in the or from something that would be console-based, something that's just plain text in the console, and moving it to be GUI-based, something that has a graphical user interface, something that looks more like all the software that we interact with on a day-to-day use, right? And so in order to do this, we're going to be bringing in another library to Java. We're going to be bringing in something called Java Swing. And when we look up Java Swing, we can look up the Java Swing documentation for Java Swing. I believe I might have it linked in the module, but either way, you can just Google Java Swing documentation, and you'll find everything that you need. And so when we Google Java Swing application, I can see here I have the official documentation here from Oracle. There's a lot of different things that we can use here, right? And in general, in the majority of applications, we're not using all of these different things. We're only going to be using, a handful of different things. Right, so I encourage you to, if you're interested in some stuff, using this documentation, one of the things that you should get comfortable with as a developer is, utilizing documentation to help you do things. And so being able to take this Java Swing documentation, look through it and see, okay, well, what do we have here that we can use? Icon, all these things here, the button, the checkbox, the dialogue, all this sort of stuff, right? And we can, click on one of these items and we can see what that means and how we can implement it into our application. And so today we're going to start off building an application that's going to be relatively simple. We're going to build a relatively simple application this week and have a more complex application next week that we'll be building. So that's kind of just where we're going with this. And so I'm going to go to Replit, and we're still going to be using Replit to be able to make these GUI applications, even though in general Replit has not been a GUI-based item for us. So far, we are going to be using Replit to create this application. We just have to use a different type of Replit when we create our Replit. Or when we create our REPL, I should say, rather. So I'm going to click Create REPL here. And instead of the regular Java REPL that we've been using, I'm going to type in Java Swing into the template search box here. And they were having a little bit of trouble earlier, so hopefully that's kind of subsided. Let me give a little refresh here. Oh, this isn't looking good. Oh, that's unfortunate. Let's have a quick look here. Yeah, it looks like there are some issues going on right now. So let me see really quickly here if I can find another online IDE that can support Java Swing. Oh, no, wait, looks like it might be coming back. They are having some problems. I'm on their incidents website here, and there are some active incidents going on right now. Let's just try again really quickly. Let's type in Java Swing and maybe. Yeah, no, it's having some problems. Let's see if we can find another IDE that we can use just for this afternoon. We'll try one more time. Well, maybe. We type in Java here, and we can see we have one that's Java with Swing. Java with Swing out in parentheses. That's the one we're going to want to use for this application. I'm going to name it. And we'll see if it loads and lets me run it. So by default, it gives me some boilerplate code here, which is a good place to start if you want to just sort of examine the code. We can see one of the things that it does that I really won't do is that it uses border factory. But I want to try to write this just a little bit nicer than this code that we have here. Do a little bit something different with it. I'm not even sure if this code will actually run because, oh, there's the main method. Yeah, they just have them in a different order than usual. So if we click run here, we'll see how Java Swing is ran in a Replit. If it will load. We see that we get a brand new window. And this brand new window is basically a virtual machine. Right? So we're creating a virtual machine environment where we can actually interact with this GUI program. And as you can see here, I can go in and I can move that window around. I can full screen that window. I can even minimize that window, although that's not good because now it's gone. But I can run it again and bring it back. And so we have a GUI program here with just a box with a label in it, right? So for our purposes here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete everything out of the main method, or out of the main class here. So I'm just going to leave the class of main in here. And just so we get some practice and I'll walk you through it, I will delete all of that as well. That's up there at the top. So we can actually do that while we talk about it. So we have the absolute bare bones of what we need here. And so what I'm going to build for you all today is just a quick program that will give you a label, give you a box to enter your text in. You enter a number in there, and it will square that number and display it as an output. So we're just starting really simple this week. So I'm going to want to import some things in here, and the two most basic things I need to import to be able to get my GUI showing is Swing itself. So I'm going to import Java x.swing.asterisk, and this will import everything from the Java X Swing library. I also want to import java.awt.asterisk. And I do have one more library that I want to import, and I will import that one later, right? The third library that I want to import is one that will help us actually listen for the event and do the actions that we want to do with our program. So let's go ahead and add our main method here inside of our main class. Give ourselves a little bit of room to work here. And we know this is going to be public static void main string args, like that. Actually, no comma in there. And then our curly braces to specify our opening and closing of our main method. And so this is where we'll call our GUI. Right, what I like to do is I like to build my GUI in a completely separate function and then bring that function into my main method so it runs from there. This, it's also going to keep your program a lot nicer if you have most of, if not all of, I mean, it's going to be most of, right? There's going to be some items that we're going to want to create at the class level so they can both be accessed by our GUI and our function that's going to actually do the work for us in this program. The function that's going to perform our action. But I like to create a function that's just for my GUI so that it keeps all the GUI stuff isolated to a particular function. And so let's build that function. And I typically like to build my GUI as a private function. When we are looking at public versus private, if things are in the same class, they can get access to public or private functions. So we can actually get access to the GUI from this same class, since we're doing everything from the same class. But if I were trying to access this GUI with another class, with another another file, I wouldn't be able to access it. It's it's something that can help a little bit with security, things of that nature. So it's something that we would want to do with that. So I want to run a private. It's going to be a void function, and we're going to call it GUI because it's where our GUI is going to live. And so the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to build the actual window that contains our program, right? And so with Java Swing, that is called a JFrame. So the window that our program is built in is called a JFrame. So we're going to want to create a new JFrame object. So let's create a JFrame object. We can give it a name. We'll call this one, let's say, win for window. And we'll set that equal to a new JFrame object. And in our parentheses here, we're going to want to put a string that's going to be the text that's on the top bar, the bar with the window controls. It's basically going to be the title on that text on that very top bar of our window. So I want to just put a string in here. We'll call it square number. Right, and that'll be what it uses to kind of figure out where to put that text. And little typo there, that should be uppercase F in frame, there in JFrame. And so now I have a window, and if I run my program, let's go ahead and call my GUI function inside of main, right? Since we're trying to call a static method, or we're trying to call a non-static method into a static method, we'll need to create a new object here. So we'll say main O equals new main, and then we can call O.GUI like so. And so we can run this and it won't error out. Right, so we have a window here, but there's nothing there on the screen. Because one, well, we haven't added it to our screen yet, right? We have to set things visible here. But two, we also don't have a size set to it yet, right? So we have to set a size for this window, and we have to actually make it visible. So with that now, I can add some more stuff here. Let's say I want to set a size here. So I want to win.set size. Right, so win here is the name of our object that we created here. It's the name of our JFrame object that we've given the title text of square and number. And my set size values here are just going to be the width and height values of the window. So let's do something like 640 by 480. Right, VGA resolution. So as you're getting started, just to make things easier, I recommend you use static values, but in the future, you can, like, as you get deeper into this, you can kind of figure out how to make your applications fluid. These numbers here are going to be important to us as we're kind of building our program, because as we build our program, we're going to have to size other elements on our application. So now all we have to do is set this to true, or set this to show rather. So f.set visible is true. And it's not F, it's win. Normally I refer to it as F because I refer to it as F for frame. But in this case, I'm trying to help you all out by referring to it as win for window. And so now we can see here is our window for our application here. We can see there it is. It says square number at the top. It's 640 pixels wide by 480 pixels tall. It has the minimize, the maximize, and the close buttons. It's just that easy to create the base window. We can kind of think about this. If you're familiar with JavaScript at all, we can kind of think about this as sort of similar to JavaScript Canvas. I know some of you who have been in some of my other web development classes have used the Canvas API to build some applications. So we can kind of think about where we're at right now being very, very similar to being able to utilize that Canvas API. And so on its own, this is pretty good, right? Like we made a window, that's great. But right now it's not really doing anything for us, right? It's just a window. But as we kind of progress, one of the things that we will see here is that everything really is very similar. Everything is very similar when it comes to how to set something up, as it was with our frame, right? So for example, if we wanted to add, say, a label, right? I want a little label for a text box that's going to give my user a little bit of direction as to what they are supposed to do with this application. So in order to do that, I first need to create a new object for my label. And a label in this instance is going to be called a JLabel. Uppercase J, uppercase L, ABEL. We'll call it L1 for label 1. And that'll be a new JLabel. Now we can set the text that's in L1 dot set text, enter number to square. So now we have a label with some text in it. And if we want to, like it basically, we could already add it to our application if we wanted to. Right? In order to add it to our application, all we have to do is just add it to our frame. So in this case, our frame is when. And we will dot add. And what are we going to add? We're going to add L1. And so that will add this little label to our frame. Now we can run this, we can stop this and we can run it. And we see where it puts it by default, right? It puts it all the way to the left and in the vertical center of the page. We see enter number to square here, looks like that. We might want the text to be a little larger. We might want to change some things here. The first thing that I think we want to do is move where this goes. Right? And this is where, in this instance, we might want to do a little bit of math, right? Because we think, okay, we have a width of 640 pixels wide. And so I kind of got to think about, where I put this label. And so in order to do that, I'm going to go right underneath my L1 here. Above my add, I like to kind of put all of my adds together at the bottom, above my set visible, right? Just kind of have things in order that way. I like to kind of put line breaks in between the different elements of my application, that sort of thing. So I want to set the bounds of this label. So it'll be L1.set bounds. And when we're setting bounds, the parameters for setting bounds are 4 parameters, right? X location, Y location, width, and height. All right, so I'm going to need an integer value for all 4 of these parameters. And my X location here is going to be the position on the X axis. So in this instance, right, it can be anywhere from 0 to 640. That's my starting X location. My Y location is on the Y axis. So it can be anywhere from 0 to, in this application, 480. And there are other methods that you can utilize for laying out your applications, right? Just to kind of try to keep things as simple as possible. I elect to go with the statically positioned values here. It's a little less frustrating than trying to learn the grid systems that are built into Java Swing. If you want to look into those, I do encourage it. But really what we'd have to do here is I kind of just like to think about, like, okay, well, where do I want to place my text box? I might want a nice big text box right about there. And how I would want to kind of place that label in relation to it. So I might want my label to be, maybe take up this room. That would be right about here. Right, and so like the more practice you get, the better you're able to kind of estimate pixels. Right, so looking at this, right, I can tell my X location is probably going to be somewhere around 40 from the left. Right, might be a little further over. That's one of the things that I like to, do when we're just doing static locations like this, is I like to just kind of guess and check and figure it out. This also kind of gives me the indication of, like, well, how wide would I want to make my text box where you're entering in the text, right? So if it's 40 from the left, then I know that I want it to also be 40 from the right, and so I got 480 as my entire width. So I'd want to place it at an X location of 40 and have a width of probably what I will set the same width as here, which would be 480 minus 40, which would be 440 minus 40 again, which is 400. So 400. Right, and the Y location is going to be down from the top. Let's put it 40 down from the top. And let's make it about 40 in height. Right, just so we can kind of keep these numbers the same. That'll help us as we build our text box as well. Because then I'll know that if it's 40 down from the top and it's 40 pixels tall, then I probably want to put my text box somewhere, started out at around 80 pixels from the top, right? So we can stop and start that to see where it's set my bounds, and it's not set my bounds here. Which is odd. It might be having some trouble. Because that should be just working. Let's close this output window and run it again. This could be Replit having problems, which would be unfortunate. Yep, it does look like it's probably Replit having problems, which is not great. Like, I'm looking for a potential typo. I'm looking for any kind of issues here. There's nothing that's coming out in the console, I don't think. Nope, nothing in the console, nothing in the shell. And nothing in the output. Let's try to go ahead and set the font, because that's something that I know will make a nice big visible change if we change the way the font looks. So I can add this to L1 as well. L1.set font. And we're just going to make it Arial, right? So I'm going to include a new font. And this is also something that you could do in a regular variable object. So let's do that here. Let's go up here and let's create font A equals new font. This will be Arial font dot plain 30, let's say 32 pixels in size. So then instead of having to write all of that in here, we can just reference A. Right, and that'll let me know for sure if things are working, because that's a much bigger font. Yeah, this is having trouble. Well, no, that's a bigger font. That worked. That's what we're looking for. Let's try to push it over a little bit more. Or you know what? I think I might have left something out of here. Come to think of it. That I need for this. I skipped a step. That's always fun. Because in order for it to know how to set a layout, it needs to know what type of layout to set. So I need to tell it not to worry about a specific type of layout. So we're going to go down here above when set visible and do when dot set layout. And we're not going to use any type of layout. So we're going to set that as null because we're going to place everything manually. That's better. That's better. So we see now we get the 3 dots here. We can choose to make our font smaller, which I think I want to do here. You know, the other option would be to make the text box whiter. But there we go. There's our label. Enter number to square. It's 40 pixels from the left. Nice big Arial font. Now we can add our text field. Now our text field here is going to be a class level object because we're going to have to be able to put our text field in our GUI, but we're going to want to be able to access the data that gets put into our text field from another function that's going to be doing our math for us. So here at the class level, up here above our main method, under public class main here, I'm going to create a J text field. And I'm going to call it, let's say T1 for text field 1, just to kind of keep the same naming structure as our label. And that's going to be a new J text field. And so that's all we have to do at the class level here. Right? It's otherwise fine, because we only have to do certain things to this object in our GUI and in our output, or in our the function that we're going to use to write the code, or to do the math is the word I'm looking for. So we want to be able to access the function, or access the text field in one function, but we want to be able to style the text field in our GUI function. And so we're going to be doing that basically the exact same way. So since this is at the class level, we're going to have to use our this keyword to work with that class level object in our GUI function. So I'm going to run this.t1.setBounds. And I'm going to give it a width and a height and or an X location, a Y location, a width and a height. So it can still start on the 40 X location. So it's 40 down from the top plus another 40 down. We'll do 80 on the Y, 400 width, and 40 height. And then we can win.add text1. So now when we stop that and run that, we can see there's our text box. And we can see that's a little small, right? So I'm going to change it to 440 because I didn't quite do my, or actually I need to change it to be way bigger than that because I'm thinking about the entirely wrong number here, right? Because our width is 640, not 440. So that means that the width that we want here is going to be 640 minus 80, which would be 560. And that's better. Right, we have roughly 40 pixels on both sides. We have our label there right above it. Right, that's what we're looking for. So, and we can see that if we type some stuff in here, we can type a value in there. Easy peasy. Right, we can set a font size on that if we want as well. So we can say this.t1.set font A again. I think that'll work. Let's give it a run, see if that'll work. And now we have big numbers in that box, right? And so we use the same font because it's still an Arial plain 28-point font, so I can still use the same object there. Right, so now we are able to enter numbers inside of this box. It can also take text. Right, we can kind of do whatever we want with that. So we really only have, we have two more objects that we need to add to this. One is the button that's going to trigger our event, and another one which is a place to hold the output. Right, so I'm going to create a button here, and a button is going to go along the same lines. It's going to be JButton. JButton, and we're going to call it B. And we're going to set that equal to a new JButton. And we can do the same stuff we've been doing, right? Like that's the whole thing here. B.setBounds. We want it 40 from the left. We want this one like 100 let's say 160 from the top, so we can have a little bit of breathing room beneath the bottom of our text box and our button. 560 and 40. Right, so we have the same bounds. We can do the font b dot set font A. I did forget something here, right? Because we also have to set text in here because our button typically has text on it, right? So as we are working with our button, we actually treat our button like our window. See, for our label, we had another thing where we set the text. With our window, we can just put our string inside of our object. And so that's what we do here. So I would put click to square inside of that parameter for that JButton object function there. Stop and start, see what we end up with. Not there yet because we haven't added it yet. But it's good to know that we didn't get an error, right? So we can win.add our button. And there's our button. Nice big button right there. Click the square. Text is centered by default. I can click it. And you can see it click. There's not an action that's been bound to it yet. But there will be. Right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to just add another little label that is going to start with no text in it. Right, so we'll start by putting some text in it. But we won't actually keep that text in. Right, so let's create a new label. This will be L2. We could also call this out. Right, so JLabel out equals new JLabel. We will out.set text. For right now, we'll just put hello world right here. Out.set bounds. We're going to use our same sort of structure that we've been using up until this point. We're going to move it down a little bit further, so it's going to be like 40, 240, 560, 40. And out.set font A. Then we can add our output here. So win.add out. Right, so if I stop and start this now, we can see what we have. We can see that our output is going to be here to the side. Right, it's left aligned. We can center align it, and I think center aligning it looks better. So I'm going to add just another line here, out.set horizontal alignment. And the alignment in this case is going to be swing constants dot center all uppercase. So I'm going to stop and run that. And now we can see that it's centered on the horizontal alignment. Now, if we want to, we can make our window a little bit smaller here, right? Because our window doesn't have to be as tall as it is. We could probably make it 380. And everything would kind of fit a little bit better. We could probably even go a little bit smaller, like 340. Right, so that just gives us a nice little GUI. there that we can use. Now, I put that hello world text in there temporarily so we can, see where that text is and see what it looks like in our application so we can make sure that we have it all aligned. But I actually don't want any text in that box. So I'm going to remove that hello world there from set text, and I'm just going to keep that in there as an empty string. So if we look at our application now, there's a box there. We just can't see it. So now we basically have our GUI ready. Right? We have a GUI. We have something that our user can come up, they can enter a number into, they can click a square, or they can click the button there to square the object. So now all we need is to actually do the action. Right? And we did make a little bit of a mistake here. I got a little bit too far ahead of myself, because this actually needs to be at the class label, or at the class level, right? So I need to move this up here to the top for my output, because that has to be accessed by both the GUI function and the action function. Now we are going to have to add our this keyword here to all of these things that we've set here. So this will be this.out.setText, this.out.setBounds, this.out.setFont, and this.out.setHorizontal alignment. Because we're going to need to be able to set that text in our action function. Now, this is where that third library is going to come into play, right? Is with our events. If you've been in other classes with me before, we've talked about events. We've said that event is any interaction with our program. It's a click, it's amount of time, it's anything that our user can do to interact with our program. So I need to import an event library. So it's our mystery Mauska tool that is becoming important now. java.awt.event.*. And so now I have my event library in here, and I want my main function here to be able to extend the action listener class from event. So I'm going to say that this implements action listener. So now my main class here is extended through the implementation of action listener, which comes from my event library. So now I can create a new function that does my events. And we will make this a public static, or let's just make it a public void function, and we can call it action. Let's call it action performed. And we will give it a parameter of action event E. So we're creating an action event variable parameter here, or parameter variable, calling it E, and that's going to represent the action. Now the action is going to be performed on our button. So to our button here, we need to add an action listener. So we're going to say b.add action listener, and we're adding it to itself. So we're going to be adding it to this. Right, so now we have an action listener that's added, that has been added to our button. So when it gets clicked, it's going to run this action performed function. Right, so what happens when we run this action perform function? Well, the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the text from that text box. And we are going to, it's going to come in as a string. So we're going to create a string variable. We're going to call it field text. And we're going to set that equal to this.t1.get text. So that will get the text out of our T1 text box. Since we created that at the class level, it can be implemented in our GUI function and in our action performed function. Then we're going to want to parse that text to an integer. So we're going to create another function to do that. And we'll say int num equals integer.parse int field text. And so that'll just take that string and convert it to an integer. It might be smart for you to do sort of a, like maybe a try except block here. Which we could, or in Java, we call it a try catch. So we could put that in a try here, just in case they put in something that's other than a integer. But let's go ahead and finish this, and then we'll come back and we'll do that in just a minute. So then we'll make a num squared, int num squared will be num times num. And then we just want to be able to set the text of our output to be that value, right? But we will have to flip it back to a string after we've done our calculations with it. So it'll be this dot out dot set text integer dot to string num squared. And we can also concatenate this with any other text that we want to concatenate it with, right? But for our purposes, and since we're already running low on time and I want to try to do a try catch block, we'll just leave it at this. And so now I have a program that for all intents and purposes works. Right? I have a GUI. I have some actions. I can stop and start this again. And so if I enter a number like 2 here and I click my button, I get a 4 on my output. I can enter a 4. I get a 16. I enter a 34. I get a 1156. Right? Really basic proof of concept here. If we try to enter something like apple, right, it kind of bugs out on us. It doesn't work. So we're going to try to do a try except or a try catch block here. Let's try to implement a try catch block here to give us the ability to do that. Because we can see we have an exception here for input string apple, but since we're using a GUI, it doesn't tell us that. Right, so let's say we're going to try to do this. But if it errors, we are going to catch. And in this case, we'll put something else in our output here. So it'll be this.out.set text, not a number. And I actually do need an argument here with catch. So this will be exception E. If the event causes an exception. And it would help, I believe, if I had the ability to spell. And I think since I already used E here, let's change this to C. Now let's try that. So if we enter in a number, it will try to do the things that are here and give us our output. If we enter in something that's not a number, it will throw the exception and we'll get not a number in our output. And that's a full-fledged application with the GUI here. So that's where we will stop for today. We'll go ahead and take some time. I'll send this out when I send the recording out. So if anybody who's here with me live has any questions, feel free to ask them now. Next week, we'll do a little bit more of a more sort of different, maybe a little bit more complicated application next time. Sometimes I decide to try to do a version of a 4-function calculator. Sometimes I do something a little bit different. Might do the 4-function calculator next week and then switch to the other thing that I normally do the week after. We'll just see how it goes. So since I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. I want to thank you all once again for watching. If you come up with any questions later, or if you're watching the recordings and you have any questions, please send me an email or a Teams message and let me know. That's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.